Okay, listen, we're going to talk about the Squid Game reality show, but that's in a moment. Before we do that, I want to tell you how Quebecers are celebrating a hero. Today on the podcast, Karl Tremblay is being honored with a national funeral. You'll hear how his music inspired a generation. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Listen, if you live in Quebec, Karl Tremblay doesn't need an introduction. The lead singer of Les Cowboys Fringants died of cancer a few weeks ago. He was just 47 years old. And the day that he died, people flocked to a corner near his home in northeast of Montreal. Look, I can't think of a bigger tribute to an artist than the spontaneity of people immediately rushing to find each other, of getting together and gathering to sing. There have been plenty of big tributes to Karl Tremblay. Flags are flying at half-mast at the National Assembly today. And there's a massive show at the Bell Centre tonight in Montreal, part national funeral, part tribute concert. That event sold out in minutes. Dominic Tardiff is a huge fan and a music reporter with La Presse. He's with us right now to remember Karl. Dominic, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Elamin.
Listen, we're seeing this extraordinary outpouring of love and grief in Quebec, but I want to start the conversation with you, Dominic. Take me back to the moment that you heard he died. What did that feel like?
It was gut-wrenching. I mean, there's always this moment you hear people say, oh, the first time I saw my dad cry because of somebody that he didn't know died was when this famous hockey player or this famous... and that thing happened with me and my daughter when we heard the news. She was like, I was crying and she's 3 years old and she was asking me, what's going on, Dad? And I was trying to explain to her why I was so sad. So it was really, really rough.
How do you begin to talk to your daughter about that kind of context and introduce her to who Karl Tremblay was?
I think the first thing I told her is that Karl Tremblay and Les Cowboys Fringants meant a lot to me as a teenager. So I'm 37 now. I was around 15 or 16 when I discovered them at the beginning of the 2000s when they were first getting big in Quebec, but not as big as they became after that in the couple of years after their first huge records. So I told her that, but there was also the fact with Karl Tremblay that it was easy to see ourselves in him and to see ourselves in everybody in Les Cowboys Fringants. They were, in the most noble sense, common people, ordinary people. So it was easy to see ourselves in the joy that they had on stage, but it was also painfully easy to see ourselves in the fact that he died so young. He had two daughters, so it's really tough. Yeah.
The idea of how much of an impact that Karl Tremblay has had in such a short period of time is pretty extraordinary, right? I mean, you say that you've had him in your life since you were a teenager, right? But he was only 47 years old. I mean, like, he was not much older than you. Can you just tell me a little bit about your memories of listening to his music as a teenager and what made you connect to him?
So I think that the important thing to know about Les Cowboys Fringants is that they became this huge band that was liked by almost everybody that speak French in Quebec. But at the beginning, they were this really underground band. And when they first started being played on the radio, it was because us, and I'm saying us as the people from my generation, we were asking the radio, can you please play some songs from Les Cowboys Fringants? And eventually in 2003, it's going to be almost 20 years now, they played the Bell Centre for the first time. They filled the Bell Centre, and it was their triumph, of course, but it was also our triumph because
you brought them there, in a sense.
Yeah.
I like the idea of you and your friends calling radio stations saying, these are the guys, I want you to play them. So I like that we talked about you and your story with them. But, you know, we mentioned that Karl Tremblay was just 47 years old when he died of cancer a few weeks ago. Why do you think there's been this massive reaction, this idea of like a national funeral in a sense? But why do you think the reaction has been so big to his death?
Because, so as I was saying, they were the band of a generation, the millennials, but they became much bigger than that because they kept on putting out great albums, and especially great songs that were speaking to a lot of people. So one of their last big hit was released around 2020. It's called L'Amérique pleure. And it's arguably their biggest song. Was heavily played on the radio, and there's a lot of people that told me that they just started to like Les Cowboys Fringants with that song. And it's really rare that a band is able to keep on putting out songs that talks as much to people as their first hit. Yeah. So I think there's that. And there's also the fact that he was so young. It's always painful to see someone go away so young, and he has 2 kids.
We've talked about the band. Let's talk a little bit more about Karl, because as the lead singer, he never seemed to try too hard to become a celebrity. You know, you have a band that is super authentic. They didn't really seem to care that much about the star system. You had a couple opportunities to meet Karl and interview him. What's your take? What's the thing that enabled him to be so down to earth, do you think?
Nobody was trying too hard in Les Cowboys Fringants, and that's a huge part of their charm. I mean, Jean-François Posé, the guitar player who writes mostly all the songs, he's not that great of a guitar player. He would say it himself. And Karl Tremblay, he became a great singer, but he's not the guy with the great voice, the big voice.
He's not like a technically trained big voice kind of singer. Yeah.
So like the couple first album from Les Cowboys Fringants, and it's also something to know about them. They're called Les Cowboys Fringants because at the beginning they were making fun. They were a country parody band. So Karl Tremblay was singing with this really nasal sound, like archetypal country singer. And Les Cowboys Fringants, everybody in Les Cowboys Fringants needed to be there, because you can't really imagine someone in the band. There's Magali who's got her solo career, but you can imagine Karl Tremblay having a solo career. And you can imagine Jean-François Posé, even though he's writing the songs, having a solo career. So they all needed each other to be that band. And I think that's one of the strengths of like the band that we like the most.
I love that. I love the idea that they sort of, rely on each other to become this thing that is in a way bigger than each of them, individually.
And when you were interviewing them, like Jean-François and Karl that started the band, they met in the hockey league. They were best friends when they became best friends after they met, but they were still best friends to this day. So this all make this all more painful. Yeah.
Dominic, I want to take a moment to listen to this moment from this summer where they performed for 90,000 people in Quebec City at the Festival d'été.
Merci surtout à vous tous d'avoir chanté, d'avoir dansé.
Dominic, listening to this, you can hear the love there. He's thanking the fans. They're giving it back.
I mean, to see someone go through, and Karl Tremblay, oncologist, wrote a really powerful letter in Le Devoir a couple of days after he passed. Yeah. And she was saying how she was telling him that he needed to stop to go on stage because it was taking out too much of him. Yeah. And Karl Tremblay's answer was, it's the best cure that I have right now, to go on stage and to sing for those people, but also with those people. So everybody was singing together at that point, and I think that they were probably sensing that something historical was going to happen that night. And it was true. Yeah, it happened.
What is so special about Karl Tremblay's relationship with his fans?
He was a down-to-earth guy. I mean, it sounds like, I hope it doesn't sound too much like a cliche, but every time I got the chance to meet him, you interviewed many people, I mean, and you know how it is. Sometimes you tell someone that his work really means a lot to you, and he acts like he hears it a lot and doesn't really give a. But with Karl, every time I interviewed him, I made a point to tell him how much the songs from Les Cowboys Fringants meant a lot to me. And every time he was reacting like, you're kind of exaggerating, Dominic. Like, it's not so. So he was this really down-to-earth guy that was really into board games and video games, that was really passionate when he was talking about those subjects. So he never became a star. And I think it's also because they were a family. The Cowboys Fringants, Marianne and Karl were each other's partner. They were friends, so they were all keeping each other down to earth.
Listen, I'm from Kingston, Ontario. I'm a big Tragically Hip person, and as you were talking, it's impossible not to notice the parallels between the Tragically Hip and the Cowboys Fringants, but also the parallels between Gord Downie and Karl. They were both poets. They both died of cancer way too young. They were both, lead singers of these bands that became tied to the cultural identity of a nation. And of course, there was that massive reaction to Gord Downie's death, and now the same thing is happening here. I don't want to do the thing where I simplify a legacy too much, by giving this analogy for an analogy that worked for the rest of the country. But also, is that the right analogy? Am I drawing the right analogy here when I sort of say this is a little bit like Gord Downie's death?
Yeah, I think there's something there because of the way they passed, because they were both young. Gord Downie was a little older, but still he was really young. Yeah. And the relationship they had, the relationship the Hip had with Canada, the relationship Les Cowboys Fringants had with Quebec. Yeah. But not to be rude to the Hip fans, but they had a tough time breaking out outside of Canada, where Les Cowboys Fringants were really huge in France. They played in front of thousands and thousands of people in France and stadiums and arenas. Yeah. So there's this little difference there, but there's something really powerful in the relationship between Canada, the identity of Canada and the Tragically Hip, and between the identity of people in Quebec and Les Cowboys Fringants. Yeah.
Listen, as a Hip fan, I don't think that's rude at all. I think that's actually really important context to bring out, because the idea of having somebody that speaks to you and reflects your identity is very good. But then when you have that person become an ambassador of that identity outside of the place, that becomes something even more powerful. The radio host and comedian Jean-François Barry did this really emotional interview where he started crying on air, talking about Karl, and he said something that really stuck with me. He said, "It's like Quebec was distilled into a little bottle that was Les Cowboys Fringants. How do you understand their role in shaping and reflecting Quebec's identity?"
What I like to say is that you were never as proud to be a Quebecer as you were when you were at a Les Cowboys Fringants concert. Even though their songs are listing many reasons not to be proud to be Quebecer, or not to be proud of our elite, and not to be proud of our government. There's one of their biggest song called En Berne. They talk about how the government doesn't care for the environment, and about how the government doesn't care for the poor and the common people. So they were talking about that in their song, but when you were in a room, when they were playing, I was proud to be a Quebecer, again, in the most noble sense, because they came out after the big sovereignist movement. But yeah, they were talking to everyone. So when you were going to a Cowboys Fringants show now, the funny thing was that there was new 16-year-old kids in front of the stage, like me when I was their age. And there was people like me in the back with their kids that were now coming to the show. The last time I saw them at the Bell Center, I was there with the friends I went with to the 2003 show. So it was almost 20 years later. Yeah. And just in front of us, there was three 16-year-old girls that we were not singing the same songs. The songs that were important to them were not the different same songs that were important to us. Yeah. So we were screaming a song called Le Chac à Hectare, which is this drinking song. And they were giving us a look like, what's happening with you old people? And when they were playing other songs, they were hugging, and it was really heartwarming to see that this band that meant a lot to me and to my friends was meaning a lot to younger kids now.
You don't get that a lot. You don't get that idea of a band's love that translates across generations. Almost 20 years to the day that they filled the Bell Center for the first time. Tonight, there's going to be a massive tribute concert that is happening. The arena will once again be full. Hey, Dominic, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry for the loss of everyone who loved Karl Tremblay, but thank you so much for your time again.
Thank you for giving me the chance to talk about Les Cowboys Fringants. Thank you, Elamin.
Thank you. My chat with Dominic Tardiff. Dominique's a reporter with La Presse. The memorial and tribute concert for Karl Tremblay happens tonight in Montreal. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Here's where we're going to switch gears a bit and talk about a TV show that I loved. I mean, I say I loved it, but I feel like everyone loved it, right? Everyone loved Squid Game when it came out. To give you context, it's Netflix's most popular show ever, with 1.68 billion hours viewed within the first month of its premiere. And it was the number one show in 90 different countries back in 2021. If you need a refresher, just in case you don't remember this phenomenon, I don't know how you don't remember this phenomenon, but if you need a refresher, the premise of Squid Game is this. 456 people play a bunch of childhood games in a dystopian world for a chance to win a lot of money, and they're willing to die for it. Let's just say they kind of do. I've been thinking a lot about that show, about why I love this Korean drama, and I'm asking this because I'm trying to figure out why the new show, Squid Game: The Challenge, is so compelling. It is a competition reality show where 456 people compete for a chance to win $4.56 million. They're playing a lot of the same games from the original show. Mercifully, they don't die in this. But the idea is, it's taking the satire about how messed up capitalism can be and then turning it into basically a game show. That doesn't seem like it should work for me. So why? Why can't I stop watching the show? To help me explain this, Alison Herman is here. Nicholas Quah is here. Alison, Nicholas, what's good, homies? How's it going?
Going good.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm so happy that you guys are here because I can't stop talking about the show to anyone who will listen. Maybe, Nicholas, I'll start with you about your initial reaction. When you heard about the show, you know what? They tell you Netflix is turning Squid Game into a reality show. What was your reaction then, and how do you feel about it now that you've had a chance to watch some of it?
Well, my initial reaction was disgust a little bit, because Squid Game inherently, like in its essence, is an anti-capitalist critique, right? It's it's really visceral, it's really violent, and like the sort of blood of it is the thing that I think entered the subconscious of a lot of people. Yeah. And so to adapt it into a reality game show, one of the late stages capitalism's like greatest totemic artifacts, it feels like you're hollowing out something here.
Yes.
And they went in with a scalpel and I'm like, I'm going to kill this thing. And by the end of the first sequence, I'm like, I think I'm bought in. And boy, am I so confused right now.
Okay, so you hear the premise and you go like, I think I'm going to hate this. And then now you're like, actually, I am kind of in. Is that what I'm gathering, Nicholas?
Yeah, I should say that there's another sort of pop culture artifact here worth noting is, a couple of months after Squid Game comes out, Mr. Beast, the very prolific YouTube creator, creates essentially a version of this game show without any of the teeth, without any of the blood. It is just sort of a vacant, YouTube creation, much like the creator himself. And so, I was expecting something like that.
Well, what do you think? What do you think it was that made you buy in, though?
I think it was specifically the moment, I think at the end, near the end of Red Light, Green Lights, when mother's
which
son
is the
gets
first challenge,
when the first challenge, and it sort of started to reveal his hand of it's a lot more interested in its people than I was expecting, and that was sort of it gives me a bit more room to want to love it. And it just kept playing with me on that thread.
Alison, Tim Harcourt, who's one of the executive producers of Squid Game: The Challenge, said, and this is the quote, "The anti-capitalist allegory is only one very small part of Squid Game." First of all, that's not true. That's the entirety of Squid Game, the show. It makes no sense to me that you go, that's only a small part of this. Instead, he says, the original series was about competition and the competitive spirit. What do you make of his interpretation there? Does the show actually end up working for you?
Well, first of all, it's not an either or. I would argue the original Squid Game uses one to do the other in that it uses competition and this very immediate format that pits people against each other to make a statement about how capitalism writ large is a deeply unequal economic system, does the same thing. And so what you have in Squid Game, the challenge is almost like a form without a function. Like it's doing the same physical things that Squid Game, the original, did, but without the sort of animating sense of purpose and narrative intent. So to answer your second question, it does work for me. And I'm not surprised that it's at least an entertaining and absorbing product of television. Yeah. But that was never the question. Like the original Squid Game also knew that, but it used the fact that we were pulled in by this to make a larger thematic statement. And this one is like, well, what if we just turned our brain off, didn't do that, and then inevitably kind of ended up recreating exactly what the original Squid Game is commenting on?
I think that's exactly the dynamic. Is like what I didn't expect for in this show is that the exact same dynamics that emerged in the original Squid Game, a scripted series, would end up emerging naturally among competitors in a way that honestly makes me feel really uneasy to watch. Nicholas, early on, two players are given what the show calls a test of character. They either can give another player an advantage or they can eliminate someone. I wanted to play you a bit of them deliberating them.
Do we send someone home?
Who would we help?
Yeah, because obviously you'd help someone that you think likes you, right?
You want to give them an extra leg in the game to see if they would help you.
But do you think in the end, and they're extending a hand back, do you think they really would grab your hand when it comes to the challenge? And what are you going to get a thank you so much?
Right, but at the end of the day, if it was you two at the end, they would still stab you in the back.
They still would stab you because
that's the nature of the game. I would do that.
Yes, $4.5 million? What the?
It's smarter to eliminate
I think it is too.
It's $10,000. One person is $10,000 closer to us winning the money.
Nicholas, I'm so uncomfortable. Even just hearing that, I should explain that every time a player is eliminated, $10,000 is added to the big sort of piggy bank. So the one winner left will get more than $4.5 million. We're not going to reveal who they chose to eliminate, but Nicholas, tell me about that scene and watching it and like your reaction to it.
Yeah, I actually really love that moment because so the context there being, they just emerged from the first challenge for like Greenlight. They're first introduced to the dorms. They are first meeting each other and seeing each other as people. Yeah. It's unclear how much time has passed, but we know it's very early stage, at least maybe a couple of hours. And already they're given this test, and already these two people are isolated to take this test, and already these two people are bringing a host of sets of assumptions into the choice, which already kind of limits the way that they're seeing the world. Because in that moment, they immediately bring every single reality television like competition mindset into it. Like it's a cutthroat thing. We're not here to make friends. We're here for the right reasons, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Where in fact, if you were to flip it around and choose to like give someone an advantage, it sets a culture. And it's sort of been an interesting kind of textual moment in which like, we hear two players kind of interpret the worst possible version of the game where in fact you could maybe build out a little bit more humanity within sort of this inhuman system. And I think that tension is the one that carries forward almost at every second of this show, which I find particularly fascinating.
Yeah, Alison, like this is the thing is that like I'm watching the show and I feel like I have no moral investment in anybody because they are all revealing themselves to be in some kind of capacity kind of bad people. And I'm not really sure I'm rooting for anyone to win so much as I'm rooting for all of them to lose. But by process of elimination, someone is going to win this thing. Like later, those two people that we just played that clip of, they we show them later having a lot of regrets about the choice that they made. And I can see a lot of people who watch the show, having a lot of, I guess, interesting conversations about morality and ethics. Is there a value to that? Is there a value to a reality show kind of poking at our own conception of morality and ethics?
Well, I think the value that Squid Game, the challenge specifically has is that it's very, very well cast. I will commend the producers on that front. They found incredible individuals to put in this competition, and their personalities are in turn drawn out. So I thought they did a great job of finding people who were either really compelling villains, as you said, who you just love to hate and watch, screw over other people. And then they actually do manage to find a handful of people who, against the odds, you sort of latch onto and have an emotional investment in. I think personally, I am really rooting for my girl Leanne, the newspaper editor, who's competing with her own son.
With her son, yes.
And has beef with the Italian, the Italian jock. And so I think, as you mentioned, the competition itself is structured, I think, to bring out intense emotions in people.
Yeah.
And they're also working with an incredibly large talent or pool of talent by reality show standards. There's over 400 people that they can then comb through and see who's popping and who ends up having a story that can come out in the edit. But I think it's mostly a testament to the contestants and how well they reveal themselves that I was able to keep watching despite my conceptual reservations.
I should say, speaking of Leanne, my favorite scene was Leanne talking to the earliest person to get the villain edit in the show. And she's like, "You're just the kind of guy who just gets what he wants, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's exactly who I am." I'm like, do you see what's happening here? I feel weird watching. Anyway, it's great. Alison, I should also say, watching the show is a good reminder of how distinctive that world of Squid Game is. You got the green tracksuits, the red light, green light doll, the bright sort of Escher-like staircases. The show recreates the sets by the creator Hwang Dong-hyuk, who so faithfully that you can see how the players kind of feel like they're in a bit of a theme park. Is that the appeal of the show? Am I watching a Harry Potter or Star Wars kind of universe? Because it seems such a distinctive little universe.
Well, I think maybe now would be a good time to talk about the larger incentives Netflix has to do something like this, which leads to maybe why they would break the underlying tenets of Squid Game to capitalize on it, which is that Netflix is not a legacy studio, right? They're not Warner Brothers. They're not Disney. So they don't have Marvel or Star Wars or Harry Potter, or any of these franchises to build on.
Sure.
And so what they have to do is take their own shows that have organically become huge and then sort of try to retrofit them into franchises. And they've done this with a little bit with Stranger Things. There's a play. They've done it a little bit with Bridgerton. And now what they're trying to do with Squid Game, the challenge is not actually the only attempt they have to expand this. There's actually real life experience here where I am in Los Angeles that's happening next month, where you can pay for the privilege of subjecting yourself to these challenges. And I think it just shows that Netflix is really just identifying what worked, and Squid Game, as you discussed earlier, worked on an almost unprecedented level, and then saying, okay, how do we turn this into something that's more durable for us? And that's the first concern, rather than, should we, or is this consistent with what the show is saying? And that's how you end up with, as you said, a theme park experience.
The notion of making one of the most searing critiques of capitalism into a theme park is so, it's too on the nose. You know what I mean? It's truly just too on the nose. Nicholas, we got maybe about a minute left here. Should the show even exist? Because honestly, I feel morally compromised just watching it.
Should it exist?
Yeah.
In many senses, most forms of pleasure and entertainment maybe shouldn't exist in its current form in our current state of capitalism.
Yeah.
But I will come to its slight defense. I mean, the thing is that it is a really rich text, and it is kind of playing with moral questions in an interesting way, because the thing that it keeps coming back to me, and maybe this is separate and independent from the actual creative intentionality of the producers, it really does make me think about who can you or who will you be under the incentives of capitalism. And then it's a little bit of what the show does in a way that maybe it's a little bit unintentional on their part, because they're putting out a lot of narrative threads here, and a lot of people are stepping up to the task, and it is still very interesting to project your own interpretations into it, independent from what actual the intention of the show is. So, we kind of we take the balls that we have and we play with them. Essentially.
But does that, okay, like literally 20 seconds left, but like, do you get an opportunity then to cheer for a person, so to speak? Like, is that a part of your watching experience, or do you feel morally compromised doing that?
Yes, but in a qualified way, which I think is true in real life, right? Like maybe we shouldn't ever cheer 100% for anybody doing anything. And that's just kind of what human nature is, right?
Maybe we shouldn't cheer for anybody doing anything is a perfect place to leave it. Alison, Herman, Nicholas Quah, thank you so much for your time. You guys are wonderful. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course, Alison Herman is a TV critic at Variety. She's in Los Angeles, and Nicholas Quah is a critic at Vulture, covering podcasts, TV, and pop culture. We reached him in Idaho. New episodes of Squid Game: The Challenge drop tomorrow. And listen, that is it for the podcast today. But remember, you can listen to any episode of Commotion anytime you like, wherever you get your podcasts. If you have like 15 seconds today, we would really appreciate it if you go over to Instagram and find us. We are at Commotion CBC, and just click the follow button. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. I'm going to be here tomorrow. If you're going to be here tomorrow, I would love to see you then.